Part 1, Introduction. BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, and let's talk about Yuya Takahashi. Born February 1st, 1978, Yuya Takahashi has worked on different anime and TV dramas, for example, a Lupin movie, episodes for Lupin 3 The Italian Adventure, then the script for Lupin 3 Part 6, the head writer for the Angel Heart adaptation. Gives me Siddha Hunter vibes. Oh wait, it's an alternate history? Cool. And even ended up as the head writer for the anime adaptation of Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible. Okay, now I know I can't hate him. But if you clicked on this video, you know him as the head writer for now Four Kamen Rider series. X-Aid, 01, Geats, and now Zets. But he's also worked on the secret mission type Tokujo episodes for Drive, script supervised Minato Takano with the Pac-Man Ghost X-Aid movie, X-Aid Tricks, the Beast Rider Squad, then co-wrote Build and X-Aid's crossover with Shogo Muto, and wrote True Ending, Brave and Snipe, Paradox with Poppy, Gem vs. Laser, and Mighty Novel X. He also wrote Kamen Rider Amazon's The Last Judgment, though he was supervised by Yasuko Kobayashi. For 01, the only episodes he didn't write were 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, 23, 24, and 32 through 37. He also wrote Railroad the First Generation, Real Time, the Metsubo Jinrai, and Vulcan and Valkyrie movies. Then he worked on the first 2 and final episodes of High School Heroes, which I also need to watch. He was also the head writer for Outsiders, working on episodes 0, 5 through 7, supervised Daiki Nagahama for episodes 3 through 4, also working on the Gem and President specials building up to it. For Geats, he worked on every episode, co-wrote the second half of the Geats and Revised Battle Royale film, the Punk Jack special, Ace and the Black Fox, supervised Hiroki Uchida on the Gotchard crossover, the Gazer movie, and the Jamato Awakening movie. Love or hate him, you have to give him some props for working on all of these works, and it's clear he's dedicated to making his job as a head writer to be as consistent with everything possible, even with crossovers. To be honest, him and Uchida could really work together as the lore keepers behind Kamen Rider. Think about it, Uchida's been able to work on crossovers and specials, bringing in multiple people at different shows and timelines, and able to make it work in a 20 to 30 minute time frame across multiple installments, while Takahashi has included new forms and abilities for writers to use, like Ultra Survive, Disaster Becoming a Kamen Rider, and Garen King form. So what's the issue with Takahashi that people have with him now leading up to Zets? Part 2, he's overused to some people. With him being revealed as the head writer for Zets, there's been a lot of people arguing that he's been overused as a writer, especially since he's worked on 4 stories in what will be 10 years after Zets is concluded. Personally, I'm not that upset, because when you look at his progression, he's basically worked on the franchise as a head writer for once every 3 years. X-Aid, passing Build and Zio to write 01, then skipping Saber and Revise to write Geats, then skipping Gotchard and Gav to then work on Zets. I understand people wanting him to take a break, but 3 years is a big opportunity to just decompress from being the head writer of a main series and look back and recognize what worked and what didn't, then come back stronger than before. Personally, I'm okay with any writer coming back as long as they show their effort, and I can respect that. Besides, some people are acting like he's worked on every series, and while I think it would be interesting to see how Revise, Gotchard, Saver, and Gav would have worked under his watch, we don't live in that timeline. Plus, like or hate Geats, Takahashi said he felt the franchise had lost its power over the last couple of years despite the franchise growing ever popular. So he wanted to make sure that Geats would go out trying to do the very best that it could be. And though I do not want Geats becoming so overhyped that people act like it's the only thing worth watching in Kamen Rider recently when it's not, to the point someone will generally tell you that any season that's not Geats that can't live up to its hype afterwards feels like the franchise is regressing. But I'm not going to blame a writer for a toxic fan base they did not cultivate. People accuse Snyder of doing this, and you can argue he does play into that a little, but at the very least his intentions have never been harmful, and I don't think he's ever advocated for his fans to do what some of them did towards anything James Gunn made. Plus, with Geats' crossovers with Revise and Gotchard, he did consult and supervise or work with the head writers of those seasons, so clearly there's no bad blood or animosity between him or any writer, and I hope the fan base realizes that. We will talk about his tropes in a bit, but I feel like people are not pointing out the fact that between all 3 of his shows before Zets, he does do things differently between all of them. And even if you don't consider the fact that the storyline plays a factor into what happens sometimes with the plot, or how much influence that the directors in Toei are willing to give a writer, especially that we know how certain forms were restricted for certain characters. Hell, I could bring up that every Kamen Rider's themes are different even if they're under the same writer, and he's tackled video games and doctors, the will of artificial life and being a corporate leader, and survival games with desires, and this time we're going into the realms of dreams and nightmares. Plus, structurally, his shows are all different. X8 was broken up into the 10 games arc, Emu's Secret leading into Maximum, then Kamen Rider Chronicle, and finally the true ending. 01 was technically supposed to be 4 arcs too, but thanks to COVID and mandates, we got stopping Metsibo Jinrai-nets, then the workplace competition, and then Aruto moving forward with his allies and enemies all trying to stop the arc, and then the fallout from that. Heck, Geet's story is broken up into 6 different parts, and even though the Yearning arc, aka the Desire Royale, and the JRPG are ones I have some problems with, alongside the Lamination arc, they're definitely different in terms of how they play out from X8, especially since the Lamination and workplace competition arcs have completely different vibes to how they conclude. I do understand where people say the shows feel the same, but there's a difference between feeling and what actually happens. And while it's fun to make comparisons, as you'll see eventually on this channel, comparisons do not always match up one for one, so let's get into his tropes. Part 3, his tropes and whether or not they're overused. Let's go through each of these tropes people say he either relies on or doesn't rely on. First up is the nice guy protagonist who becomes more cynical as the show races on. Personally, I already know this argument is going to be a little dumb because every protagonist in Kamen Rider has to go through something really, really messed up, and we know they're going to come out of it either better or more resolved. But even then, I argue for Baku. Yeah, it's kind of important you have a heroic character who's fighting nightmares to not be a bad person. With Emu, I don't agree with this take because he takes the job as a doctor more seriously, and while he becomes more ruthless, technically that's him just becoming more confident and accepting of his role. People point out that he killed Prado, but people also leave out that he was just trying to teach his brother the importance of the value of life, and revived him immediately after he learned his lesson. Aruto is the one who became more cynical, and that's mostly because he lost Izuo at the end, which wouldn't have happened had Hirobi not taken the path in cynicism, though Azu's to blame. Really, I don't think he needed Arc 1, but that's more of him having the one time where he wasn't able to process his grief. And Ace is the complete opposite of this trope. While I wouldn't call him cynical, he's definitely more standoffish and manipulative, but his journey is learning from others and actually bothering to help out other people, so that after his mom dies, he already has both the experience and now the resolve to make sure the world's a better place where she's gone to be a happy one. If you think he's cynical, for a guy fighting for 2,000 years, he goes from cynical to optimistic. Second would be the morally upright hero becoming a villain as the show goes on, and this one is definitely more debatable on its execution. But let's look at each of his 3 series. First off, we're going to look at Hero and why it worked in X8. Remember, Hero was being manipulated into joining Masamune Dan's side late into the show because Masamune promised him he'd revive his late girlfriend, if he did, but he actually tried to refrain from doing villainous things as much as possible, even refusing to kill Taiga and not perform surgery on him, despite Masamune threatening to erase his girlfriend's data if he did, and yet he still went through with it. Same with Kirya, he was revived but acted that way as a villain to get the Hypermuteki Gashat and the Proto Gashats back from Masamune Dan. The series following that are more of a mixed bag. With 01, we know that Yuya had an agenda against Hiden, but probably was that the show wasn't letting her do anything that was the main problem, even if the story about her overcoming her job harassment had a solid conclusion, but there's no long conversation between her and Aruto. We don't see her helping the Raiders when it could have been her and Naki working together the whole time, but we never learn the backstory on what led to her having this mindset. When something simple as Aruto's grandfather modeling human gears off her parents and either not giving them the credit or having their hands on the creation of their demisers. So even if she wasn't doing much, we'd understand, but the brain control just couldn't be the only reason. As for Aruto's makes sense given Izu died. It's just the road that we got there that ended up being contentious. Geets has the 2 more divisive elements in Keiwa and Buffa. Also, one of these actors got harassed online from Japanese fans. So let's just agree that even if we don't like something, we don't have to be toxic about it. Going with our Ninja Tycoon first, I think the face heel turn he makes sense, but we do know that this was planned to be earlier, though I'm gonna assume it was probably around the Yearning arc. But I think the real problem was that we didn't see the conversation where Zik convinced him to hand Sumuri over, and some people think that because he was so nice for him to have a hate boner for Ace's mom was out of character. I don't 100% agree it was out of character, but it was weird he didn't take everyone's truth of the matter into opinion first. I feel like if Keiwa had rationalized his loss of resolve back in the Scheme arc was because of that, and felt like regardless she was responsible for manipulating people and that winning and reviving everyone would stop that from happening, I feel like that could have eased into the motivation a bit more. But for the people that completely hate it, I'm not upset by it that much. Buffa's problem was more in the sense that he didn't own up to the fact that he took so many people's lives until Sarah, and I understand where he's coming from in the sense that without the writers system, there wouldn't be no need for anyone to be dying in these pointless games for people's entertainment. The problem was because of Bebera, he never had the chance to find a compromise between defeating the members of the DGP who are getting in his way and harming random civilians for Bebera's entertainment until he got the chance to make a wish. If he at least voiced as much frustrations about using real people, I feel like that could have went along better though. As for Takahashi trope number 3, the antagonistic, quirky killer game master and corrupt corporate executive. Personally, I feel like people pick on this one too much. Like, that really only applies to X8 and Geats. And that's what happens when you're dealing with a game show and magic system powered by video games. Plus, more CEOs are technically evil based on greed itself. And X8 put a good CEO in charge, while Aruto was meant to be a heroic and model CEO. And the DGP isn't a traditional organization. I guess I would include time control with antagonists as Kronos, Regard, and Zane. But I haven't seen all that much of Outsiders, and even then, one person is named Kronos, and Regard's time powers only became a thing in the 2-part finale. And considering the latter exists in a world with constant world resets, that one I think is a little unfair to complain about. Unless you're upset about the amount of resets, which you could debate on how much should have happened, or what should have happened when the world was reset. But right idea, but you gotta frame the argument better. Okay, the Purple Riders Becoming Murderers one was one I had on the list, but I just think it's funny that people are blaming Takahashi for that when this has been a thing since Ryuki. Like, unless you count the Taros, I think Shinobi was like the first one that didn't count as a villain or an anti-hero. Like, yes, I know Tsurugi technically counts as an anti-hero since he was revealed to be a worm the whole time. But if we're talking about anyone who became a villain, yeah, this was long before Heisei Phase 2 was a thing. Well, what about the huge amount of writers in the shows? Ryuki, Hibiki, Kabuto, for those who count 5 or more too much, and Gaim all exists. Too many writers is now a lazy excuse for people who have a preference and think that preference means that they should have an objective view on what makes good writing. If you have an issue with how the characters are balanced, that's on a story and case-by-case basis depending on the season, of course. And you should judge each season by how it executes that, not just on how many writers a show has. Fourth one I'll go into a bit more detail about. The rival over the secondary in terms of storytelling importance. Okay, this I feel is a very unfair argument to have when it comes to X8 and 01, considering that the Purple Riders were the main antagonists of at least 2 arcs, even if they weren't that active in one of them. Like, Hiro and Fuo were still active in each arc with their own subplots or working with the heroes against these guys, provided they weren't fighting the hero, of course. With Buffa versus Tycoon, we were told from the beginning that Tycoon was a secondary and Buffa was a rival. And if we're arguing over who had more focus, first 3 arcs it was Tycoon, 4th and 5th arcs it was Buffa, and final arcs Keiwa's Crash Out took more story priority. A minor trope I hear mentioned is when a childish character matures, and with how the story goes, I can really only think of Parado and Jin. Because if we're saying that some of the characters in Geats are childish for just trying to accomplish their dreams, that feels way too cynical even by the standards of the dark elements of this franchise and its shows. As for the overpowered final form, this goes for like most final forms. They're overpowered because they're like the ultimate form of strength, at least within the 40 to 50 episode length. Like, at this rate from other shows, Gaim was fighting overlords, Agito kicked God in the face, Ryuki survived, beats almost every rider, Mugen helped Takeru take on a god-level ghost, and both of Zio's final forms are busted. Hell, Saber stopped 2 worlds from merging with Cross, and Takahashi didn't even start writing this trope. 5th trope I want to get into is the villains going unpunished, and I feel like the biggest complaints towards this are Gayamatsu, Michinaga, and Daichi. But to understand the problems with him, we need to look at Dan Kuroto because people have also accused X8 of this without understanding Kuroto's not exactly redeemed in the way people think. Basically, from a sympathetic perspective, Kuroto's goal is to create Ultimate Kamen Rider Chronicle as his game, and it seems on the surface he wants to control the lives of people, because when he learned he created Zero Day, we even later learned from that he was motivated by the loss of his dead mother, and wanting to use Kamen Rider Chronicle as a means to revive anyone who died just in case. But it never excused the fact he started Zero Day and was so callous regarding the lives he just took to even start this program. It feels like people forget when Kuroto came back, Poppy had to dive in the video game world to search a way to defeat Paradono, since the Bugster took advantage of Emu and got a level 99 upgrade with the gamer driver, ready to kill him after their clash. And even then, none of the heroes are happy Kuroto's back, but they begrudgingly work with him because he's got a vengeance against Parado and later Masamune. He gets killed numerous times, his dad outplays him, he loses Muteki, and Kiri has to defeat him numerous times in order to create the antibodies. Then we get the Another Ending trilogy where his true motivation is to play the villain by setting the heroes up in order to return all the people he imprisoned in the Proto-Gashats. But because he's such a massive tool and presents it as a challenge, he forgets that only the writers are able to fight back, and that's only like 8 people in the world at best. With Guy Matsu, I've seen people say he wasn't punished enough, and I don't entirely agree. He gets beaten down by every named writer in the show and a CEO, but I feel like more people are upset about how the writing decisions affected other characters surrounding them, about how Yaiba is reduced to not doing much and being under mind control. Aruto doesn't want to harm the Magia, even though you could argue killing them or resurrect them from the competition will take away time. And Fua, okay, actually there's nothing wrong with him, plus he gets away with cheating. Well, Guy does. Personally, I think the solution would be to either oust him from Zaya during the competition arc during the final game, but he still ends up taking control of Hiden, and after he gets beaten by Arc, either William or Arc tortures him left and right after exposing his role involved with the Malice, or William just fires him or gets him removed from his office and forced to work in a desk jockey for a while, or just build up his motivations that weren't just out of a desire to protect humanity, but also preserve what it was like, or lean into that his father treated him like an AI, that he had to be ruthless to work his way up through Zaya and wanted to use the Arc so that the prophets could prove himself correct alongside his father's teachings. But Dowser does have a compelling case as a character who created the very monsters he wanted to fight the world against, so he could push humanity as their own saviors instead of relying on AI, but his methods being wrong was a problem. Again, I don't even have a problem with the redemption because we could have learned more about his backstory before his heel face turn episode. I don't dislike him though, but I don't think the solution would be to just not have him in the show. Michinaga's a weird case. He is the rival of the show, but there is a debate that the show magically just turns him into a hero, and I don't 100% entirely agree with that either. From the start, we know he hates the DGP because his friend was callously sabotaged by 2 Kamen Riders that left Toru to die and wants the whole system to crash, and you could argue that Ace just showed up too late, so Ace didn't necessarily want him to die, but he just couldn't do anything about it until it was too late. So Buffa wanting to destroy Kamen Riders by stopping them from having to fight in the first place does make sense. Personally, eventually when he gets the goal of wanting to end the Desire Grand Prix, it kind of adds up given that everything we know about him. But then there's the fact that he works with Bebera and Daichi and allows us as a civilian to get killed as part of the Heaven or Hell game in the JGP and gets away with it. But then that bullheadedness gets him in trouble with Keiwa after accidentally killing Sawa and the other 2 human hosts, Bujin wrecking the crap out of him and Buffa having to make up for it. The problem is, well, he needs to take more responsibility for the Heaven or Hell game. But speaking of co-conspirators involved in that, let's talk about Daichi. See, I don't hate Daichi, but I get why everyone else does. Really, my problem is that we don't get a focus episode that explores his backstory and why he ended up being so apathetic and lacking empathy until he decides to create the Tree of Knowledge. Especially since how he ends up taking Archimedes' place. A simple fix would either be to take an approach from Kanado. Say he was born without certain emotions and was more ruthless and devoid of emotions compared to the others, leaving him isolated, mistreated, and misdiagnosed by everyone from loved ones to the rest of the world, and the DGP being his opportunity to find a place his genius will be appreciated. It would at least make him more sympathetic as long as it was revealed before episode 40. Now, regarding the criticism, how people dislike both of them and they think they got off way too easily for their actions, I think there is a way for the show to address both of those criticisms. Well, one of the complaints people have with Geats is that some of the actions that took place during the Desire Royale and Genesis Royale were elements that should have been introduced earlier in the game. I think we should have made Daichi's goal of pursuit of all knowledge as something he wasn't sure he could attain by winning the DGP, but still have the goal of actually creating the Tree of Knowledge by acquiring the souls, cores, and spirits of those that John Metal Slay or kill, and Daichi makes it, but can't complete it until he takes Archimedes' role as the main gardener. So all the lives taken in Jamato Grand Prix could be restored like Sawa was, but it took Buffa having to buy Daichi enough time not just to resurrect Sarah, but also take the methods of working with the Jamato in order to revive everyone as a heroic parallel to them only being used as cannon fodder. After all, the Tree of Knowledge has to be motivated from someone. But yeah, I don't think the problem is that the villains go unpunished, is that some of the antagonists just need a bit more of that extra step in order for the redemptions or the decisions to work with the heroes feel complete. It's not just so black and white, is that they just need to be redeemed or everyone gets redeemed without consequences. But again, Kamen Rider fans and Nuance need to be more in sync. As for constantly bringing back dead characters, I feel this one's an unfair criticism because Takahashi does come up with clever ways to bring them back that make sense within the lore. For example, in X-Aid, well, we know that everyone got converted into Data who died, so villains like Graphite and Parado can come back even if their data gets restored or gets revived into newer and higher levels. And for all the humans like Kirya, Kuroto, and Saki, one was revived to use against a hero only for his humanity to end up with having him play along and screw up Matsune's plans. Kuroto is actively someone who would come up with a backup plan just in case he died, and Saki was literally used as a bargaining chip to get Hiro on his side. Though I'd argue they could have just went Hyper Muteki and Emu could have saved her doing the Don't Perform Surgery on Taiga episode. But whatever, we need drama. Plus, at the end of the show, they do say that they still need to work on reviving everyone, but it's going to be really hard to do, and we don't even know how many people would get revived even after Kuroto's plan to use Zombie Chronicle took effect. With 01, no, naturally, I don't think he was going to plan on killing any of the humans off in the main cast. Don't want to come to the villains considering that we're dealing with sentient androids. It could always be rebuilt. After all, Hirobi was an Outsiders. Really, I think the problem is that the 01 Others movies were controversial in just how they handled everyone. Though we don't know if Fuwa died. Odds are he probably recovered in the hospital because it's not like Yaiba wouldn't have tried to save her man in some way or form. Izo, I think, might be the bigger talking point since she did die and some people felt that her return in 01's finale was a cop-out. So the movies restoring her memories and teaming up with Aruto as 02 was a remedy. Personally, I don't think she needed to die in that final arc in the first place, but I get what the writers were going forward in terms of parallels, so I guess it's up to your take, although it's not as bad as people make it out to say, in my opinion. And then with Geats, well, we have the rules, and the games literally have an option of if you get defeated in the game or have your ID cores broken, you lose your memories of the desired Grand Prix and your motivations, but you still got to live. So a lot of characters will get retired if the show plans on using them later. So in that case, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. People have pointed out Buffa surviving after the second arc was this too, but using Zombie as a means for revival is just a show working with its mechanics in order to justify a story beat, which I personally thought was pretty clever. And it's a version of what happened with X8, but I see why people don't like that one, but it really isn't that big of a deal in terms of how do you get a character to come back even though they should be dead. Really, the ironic part is that there was a valid argument to be had in that the show had opportunities to revive and return characters who retired or died in earlier games. But the JGP only has the Jamato take on replicas of past players for the heroes to fight. And even then, it's only 2 people who get quickly forgotten about. And then there's Keiwa's Wish, which had the opportunity to bring them back along with everyone else, and yet they did it. What you could argue was a wasted opportunity for them to get closure with the main quartet, especially those who resonated with Keiwa, Neon, and Buffa. But again, the issue isn't necessarily dead characters getting revived. It's that there does have a valid explanation for how they come back and whether or not they were being used effectively with the return, which is what we should be focusing on. Oh, right, there's also an argument of the guy who dies in the first quarter of the series comes back in the final quarter or third quarter. Okay, look, is anyone really mad Kirya came back? I mean, Jim coming back was inedible though. Metsuro Jinrai having one of its 4 main villains be permanently dead for that long wasn't going to happen. And as for Punk Jack, I heard his actor was busy, but just confirming that he barely survived, especially given that most of the people behind the DGP have future technology to help them resurrect or revive, doesn't really bother me. And he does help out with the investigation, so I guess it's just a catch-22. Okay, I think that's all the topics we have to talk about. Oh, wait, it's female characters. Fine, let's talk about this one quickly. Regarding his cute female non-human sidekicks, Poppy was interesting because she had the dual personality but did play a role in the plot as a non-human ally, but got taken really seriously when the Bugsters reprogrammed her to join them for Kamen Rider Chronicle, but then became a writer, fought with the heroes a few times, and sacrificed herself in the finale to distribute the antivirus to everyone, so she was fine. Izu was comically serious and did have a character arc, having her own singularity and almost feeling more human at the time. And Tsumure was an artificial human created by Swell to manage the DGP as its navigator and replacement Tsume, though eventually she gained her own will and disagreed with upper management, even if she could argue she was her own plot device. She at least had some agency in what she was trying to do. As for how Takahashi handles his female writers, okay, Poppy's main problem was that she only transformed in her debut, her turn to good, when Parado 99 and Kuroto's debut happened. Then she has a really good moment where she, Kirya, and Emu defeat Masamune together in episode 37. And she still doesn't transform until after the show ends, though at least she gets focused on her dual special with Parado and Girls Remix. It didn't help her and Nico were gearing up to fight Motors. But then Parado interrupts it and the boys have to go deal with them. Like, they really should have had made a second Buggle driver for her to use instead of her and Kuroto just, sharing it. Or her dance powers during the final arc to use that to restrain everyone that was being affected. Or even help out some ride players in Nico in more fights since some of their escapades happened off screen. Yua's main problem is that she sidelined too hard after episode 17. They set her up being Guy's pawn, but outside of mind control, she's not allowed to do anything that major when an easy fix would have been have her be the Raid Rider's creator alongside Naki, using Naki to distribute them under Guy's orders. So technically he's not cheating, she's doing it for him, and just explain her backstory. The others' movies showed that her teacher was involved in making arms weapon systems that got a child killed. Hey, maybe add that in the show. Her parents helped Hiden to avoid that happening in the future. But when Daybreak happened, her parents were also gravely hurt, and their faces were turned for human gear usage for Yuya that went defunct, with Yuya wanting revenge and working with Guy, since even though he made the arc, Sorio's tech failed both of them, only to reveal that Guy set her up. Well, more so set up her parents to fail to push her into joining as a tool this whole time. And maybe after she and Jin only failed to create a physical body for the arc, maybe have her make a fail-safe antivirus, allowing her to slow down the villains so the heroes could be able to restore their singularity. Or instead of just being sidelined with Fuwa for the last 3 episodes, have her overcome her malice, resurrecting Jin with William's help, and working with Naki to fight the remaining Magia and develop a solution to defeat and revert the Magia back to normal human gear without destroying them, and join the others, in the protests, and just giving her Jackal fighting reworked into the Shot Riser either during the finale as a final form, since Aratos was able to shut down the rest of her forms, or during the fight with Dowser to show how far she's come. And as for Geets, it feels like Neon's writing was an attempt to fix both of those two characters in the past, and I will say he succeeded for the most part. I have some people say that they don't like that female characters are motivated by love, but we've seen that with male characters not really getting resolution, so I'm glad they kind of fixed that here with her. Her plotline through the series is her standing up to those who only find her dreams shallow, and her mom finding out about her family's connections to the DGP and using them to help her friends, being forced to conspire against them but still try to stop the JGP and meet Kyun, only for Bebera and her family to expose the truth about her and Akari, her choosing to leave home but choosing to stay for her friends, helping her find her tone, and getting the love from her family she always wanted, while also trashing Bebera for her actions. Kinda glad she got love from both her family and the boyfriend. The only problem I have is that after she disappears from the JGP, the Desire Royale are like the only goal that she has in those arcs is just helping Sarah and moving out of her parents' place. We don't see Irumi trying to join the game to save her and make up for what happened like her father did. And outside of just getting her eliminated from the tournament, no one in the GGP really seems to care for her, when they could have had some players attempt to execute her as revenge for stealing Akari's name. Well, allegedly, assuming she did. Also, really would have been a good opportunity to give her and Keiwa the laser boost super forms like Geet, since they are the Rider trio. But other than that, she was a good character and probably the least controversial out of the main 4. So we can agree when it comes to writing female writers. He's gotten better, right? Oh my god, this video is almost 30 minutes? Jeez! Okay, look, now I admit this video was supposed to come out a lot earlier in the month, but hey, sometimes you can't blame sickness, work, dry throats, and life just being sucky for everything, right? As for Zets, well, this video was supposed to come out before it debuted, and as of recording this, we're between episodes 2 and 3, and I haven't watched episode 2 yet. I will say that based on what it seems, it looks like some of these tropes either won't be as prevalent, or not going to be as devisely handled as it seems, since when it comes to the protagonist role, Baku's a hybrid of Emu in terms of being a nice person, and Ace as his dream world is the kind of suave, charismatic person that he wants to be. And it's going to be very interesting to see how Takahashi explores that. But to make a long story short, I don't think Yuya Takahashi deserves a slander. Like, every writer has their strengths and weaknesses, and by giving constructive criticism to their weaknesses, we are able to better adjust what can be improved for future series, and just when it comes to Kamen Rider and storytelling in general. After all, storytelling only improves when you actually understand the problem instead of just complaining about minor things that don't affect anything in the long run. But tell me what you think. Do you think Yuya Takahashi deserves a slander? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What other Kamen Rider videos would you like me to talk about? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and VIP of His Productions, signing off. Ah, crap, I'm gonna be late for work. I gotta go. Bye.